Youth is a time when one is young, because one day they will be old, we will all be old. They will think of the stories they have created, this will be there forever. The dreams they have, the love they share, this is them, this is us, this is our youth.
These influences range from social media, communication and relationships, socio-cultural and socio-economic influences, health and well-being, and so many more. But the life of a young person who's living in Australia who identifies as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander faces racism. A key point to keep in mind is that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population is so much younger than the rest of Australia, with the median age being 20 years old, which is 15 years younger than the rest of Australia. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people comprise of only 3.3% of the whole population of Australia, which highlights the majority of them are facing the challenges of being a young person right now today. According to Paradise, racism is experienced in three forms. 1. Individual racism, which is the most common form depicted consciously. So let's have a little look of an example of this here. The second is institutional racism, which is ingrained within our society. Hypothetically, this can be seen when an Aboriginal person is applying for a job and is turned away due to their Aboriginality. Lastly, everyday racism. It's ingrained within our society and is generally seen when someone says, "I'm not racist, but." So let's have a little look of an example of this here. So let's look at some of the statistics. The youth survey in 2019 identified that 4 in 10 Aboriginal young people experience a form of discrimination. More than half who participated face discrimination on the basis of their race or cultural background. Now that we have that covered, the basis of racism and the statistics, let's have a look into the life of Levi. Levi is a young male who is 23 years old and identifies as Aboriginal. But this hasn't always been the way. During Levi's youth, being Aboriginal wasn't something that his mother and father was proud of. It was a topic of discussion that was always shut down, not discussed, and ultimately it was ashamed of. However, in comparison, C is a young 23-year-old who is a proud Aboriginal male that faced racism during his youth due to living in a community with low diversity and understanding. Within this community, many withheld racist ideologies and remarks about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. However, differing from Levi, Zeke came from a supportive family that taught him to be proud of his identity. The racism Aboriginal people face during their youth can take a major toll upon their health, both physically and mentally. A cross-sectional study conducted by Priot highlights young Aboriginal people between the ages of 16 and 20 face high volumes of racism that underpins their overall health and well-being. There is a clear link between the determinants of health and racism. This interrelationship also plays a major role concerning a young Aboriginal person's geographical location. Priest identified racism occurring in an urban setting, experienced poor mental health, and overall physical health was 52% poorer for young Aboriginal people in urban areas. However, Levi defined these statistics and stated that at times where he felt down and stressed, he relied on sports, physical exercise, and surfing to help him and his overall mental health. as Levi stated that surfing became a happy place and where I find my connection to country, and it clears my head. Z, similarly to Levi, also utilised sports, being fit and active as a way to improve his mental health and the strains that racism places upon health. His supportive family also helped him with strategies to deal with racism because they were in the exact same position that he was during their youth. Fitting in during one's youth can seem like a make or break moment during a young person's life. And this was certain for Levi. He was attending a Catholic school with a low diversity, and it meant he was left thinking, if people knew I was Aboriginal, it wouldn't have made it any easier to fit in, thus reaffirming the intergenerational effects of racism and the negative stigma surrounding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and ultimately compromised his mental health. This experience is somewhat similar for Z. He attended a predominantly Caucasian school during his youth. This was a time where learning about his Aboriginality within the school system was lost, leaving him to feel like an outcast within his own school and community. This was highly due to the minimal education about Aboriginal culture, and the only time learning about his culture was through the first settlement of Captain Cook, where it was a negative portrayal. Not only is fitting in of high importance, but so is social media and technology. Levi expressed the importance of it, as if you don't keep up, you'll just fall behind and disconnect with everyone. Social media highly influences an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young person's life, as it opens up another avenue for racism. With over 33% of the population facing a form of racism online and 20% receiving direct threats. In comparison to Levi, Z stated that social media wasn't very important. He focused his energy into other avenues, and this also enabled him to avoid the effects of online racism. During a young person's life, substance use becomes a topic of discussion and experimentation. Racism leads to poorer mental health, and unfortunately, for Aboriginal youth, substance abuse is a form of stress coping or self-regulation as a result. Over 60% of young Aboriginal people between the ages of 18 and 24 drink to a defined low or middle range of risky. Levi expressed that during his time, drinking was a regular event during the school years of 10, 11 and 12, and felt a lot of social pressure from his peers to partake in it. On the other hand, Z had a family history of substance abuse on his father's side of the family, in which his parents did everything they could to ensure Z would not follow this path. Z started to partake in drinking alcohol here and there during his youth, but it was never a big thing in comparison to Levi. Communication and relationships during youthful years are predominant. However, for many Aboriginal families, racism is common. Haswell explains that the effects of historical experiences of racism that result in trauma are often passed on from the parent to the child, where this is seen in Levi's family, as they dismiss their culture, leaving Levi to never face the full effects of racism due to his Aboriginality being hidden. However, the fear and the embarrassment was passed on from his parents, causing this intergenerational effect. In contrast, Z's relationship with his parents was supportive during his adolescence. However, many of his relationships with his friends, teachers, parents, and community members were comprised of stereotypes and misunderstandings. However, Z had a small supportive group who to this day he would still classify as great friends. However, in the future, things are starting to look a little bit brighter. The Racism Stops With Me campaign has been developed by the Australian Human Rights Commission to ensure that communities develop anti-racism educational tools, activities and materials that support change. The National Strategic Framework for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Youth's Mental Health and Social and Emotional Wellbeing began in 2017. This development prevention service for communities in need, with a focus of implementation that is appropriate, cultural, respective, properly costed and operational. Rice identified Aboriginal youth also feel empowered by technology and social media, as it promotes identity, power, cultural collaboration, community, family, and connectedness, as well as the development of the education program Be Deadly Online that addresses online racism. The Gyro Purity Project was developed to end the stereotypical and racist views, with young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people at the centre of the program, in collaboration with their non-Indigenous partners and friends to address education, culture and monitoring and their future.